Welcome everybody to Culture of Life. I'm George Buscemi from Campagne Québec-Vie, and today we've got an amazing show lined up for you. We've got Polish bishops resisting LGBT ideology. We've got CBC propaganda. We've got François Legault folding to the LGBT juggernaut. We've got Boy Scouts and pedophiles and a lot of other stuff, so stay tuned. First off, Catholic Archbishop warns of rainbow plague threatening Poland. So this is news out of Poland, out of Krakow. And a Polish bishop over there had some strong words against the LGBT ideology. And this is news from RT.com. So I will quote this bishop. He said, "Our land is no longer affected by the red plague," so communism, "which does not mean that there is no new one that wants to control our souls, hearts, and minds. Not Marxist, Bolshevik, but born of the same spirit, neo-Marxist, not red, but rainbow-colored." So that's what he talks about. He talks about a plague or a rainbow disease now attacking Poland the same way that the communists were, at least intellectually and morally attacking Poland. So this bishop is actually doing his job, defending the faith and morality of a country that's still Catholic, and because of bishops like him. And so, of course, there was a huge backlash and an international outcry in all the Western media that's already been conditioned to supporting the LGBT cause. But the Polish bishops as a whole, the Bishop Conference, then published a statement that I thought was pretty strong as far as bishops' conferences go. It was a pretty good. I will read that statement. So the president of Polish Episcopate issues statement on LGBT+. So it goes as follows. "Respect for specified individuals cannot, however, lead to the acceptance of an ideology. Despite the holidays, which should be a time of rest and reflection on the beauty of nature created by God, polemics arose in Poland over the LGBT ideology. This is probably related to the offensive of LGBT milieus and a significant increase in the number of so-called pride marches organized in our country, as well as with the introduction to school curricula of a new approach to sexual education in accordance with this ideology planned by some local governments after the holidays." So in Poland, as in everywhere else in the Western world, they are now pushing LGBT ideology in schools through sex ed programs. So this is happening in Ontario and Quebec. The Legault government just started the sex ed program in the fall of 2018, and it's going on everywhere. And in Poland, it's no different. So they're resisting this. And so they're saying people belonging to milieus of the so-called sexual minorities are our brothers and sisters for whom Christ gave his life. Respect for specified individuals cannot, however, lead to the acceptance of an ideology. Hence my appeal to local authorities not to make decisions that, under the guise of countering discriminations, would conceal the ideology that denies the natural gender difference and complementarity between men and women. And then it goes on to conclude that we should have free speech on both sides. If the LGBTs have free speech, then the Catholics should have free speech as well. So that's how they conclude. And I have to applaud this. Now, this bishop makes a very normal, very Catholic distinction between the person and his ideology. If you accept the person, you need not accept all their beliefs. And that's a distinction that a lot of people cannot make. There's the person that we love, that we want to be the best they can be, and there's the opinion that person has, which may or may not be correct. And how do we know it's correct or not, their opinion? Well, we have to look at reality. And that's the third thing in this scenario. So you have two people, and then you have a objective reality that mediates. And the highest reality is God. And God has revealed himself in the person of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has founded a church that has transmitted a moral teaching. And so that's the objective norm for morality. And nature has been stamped on us by God, our nature, our human nature. So that's another standard to which all of us have to look toward to see what is right and wrong. And what the LGBT ideology refuses is this norm that mediates, this norm that says, no, you can't do this or you can do this. Everything about the LGBT ideology is about the subject, is about respecting the person's opinion and point of view. And nothing is about respecting objectively what is right or wrong. That's what's not accepted. So the only thing that's accepted in LGBT ideology is each person's opinion, and what is not accepted is the truth. Whereas Catholicism doesn't respect opinions. It respects persons, individuals. You have to respect each individual. You have to love each individual, but you don't have to respect their opinions. In fact, to love somebody sometimes means to refute their opinions, their errors. Because some people are in error and others aren't, and that's just too bad. That's just a fact of life. So there we have a bishop saying something that makes a lot of sense, and that's why Poland is still Catholic and is still against abortion and still has decent marriage laws, and I hope it stays that way. Now, next item is terrible news out of Montreal. A sacrilegious homosexual dance performed in historical Montreal Catholic Church. This is news out of LifeSite News. So here we read, a historical Catholic Church in Montreal is at the center of a major controversy regarding the use of its sacred space for a profane and sinful act performed in the sanctuary. LGBT artist, activist Matthew Richardson released his most recent production titled Hallelujah on May 1st of this year. The video was set in the sanctuary of St. Peter the Apostle Catholic Church and was produced in order to promote a message of tolerance by juxtaposing hate messages on one hand and religious messages, and then homoerotic choreography. And you see clips of it right now. And I'm hoping nobody's had any food in the last few minutes because it's pretty rough. While Richardson claims to have hoped not to say something bad about religion, quote unquote, the fact remains that the production of his performance within the church may have constituted acts of sacrilege and desecration. So may. I think that it comes pretty close to crossing that line. In fact, it goes over the line and runs another few yards. It's a pretty horrific display of sacrilege. It has no business being there. It's a massive mistake by whoever's in charge over there at that parish or church. It's in fact a false church, and that's what's the big problem is right now in the Catholic Church, is that there's this traditional Catholic Church that hands on the tradition of the apostles from St. Peter and the other 11 apostles going forward to this very day. That's the Catholic Church instituted by Jesus Christ. And then there's this other church, the Church of the New World Order, the eco-church, the LGBT-friendly, inclusive church that is slowly coming into being. And these types of churches, like Saint-Pierre-Apôtre in Montreal, are the bridgehead churches where every city in the West have these LGBT churches and other allied parishes that are like a tumor, a false front, false church, and who have a completely different outlook, a completely different view, and it's not Catholic. So they espouse an ideology of inclusivity. So everybody is accepted. Everybody can come into our parish and we don't judge. Well, yes and no. Jesus Christ wants everyone to be saved. He loves everyone. And so as members of the mystical body of Christ, Catholics are called to love everyone, to want everyone to be happy, and to be saints. And so, of course, we welcome everyone. Jewish people, Islamic people, gays, etc., etc., etc. Anybody who is not conformed to God is invited at the banquet. They're invited, but there's something you have to do. You have to respond to the graces of the invitation, and you have to convert, meaning you have to fully conform yourself to Christ. That's me, that's you, that's everyone is invited to that. And you do that by listening to the commandments of Christ. Marriage is between a man and a woman. Homosexuality is a sin. A lot of other sins that are not popular. For example, charging a high interest rate is a big sin. Pornography, masturbation, these are serious sins, and people are called to convert, to stop doing that. Sodomy is also a sin. So for these parishes to kind of to play, to be very vague about what sin is and what to do about it, they're not helping. They are not being welcoming. Or they are being welcoming, but for the wrong people, for the wrong person. They're not welcoming people to Christ, they're welcoming people to Satan, to hell. So when you have a homosexual person who does not want to change their orientation nor their behavior, they want to keep doing what they're doing, but they want to feel welcome. To make them feel welcome in that way is not helping them. It's actually harming them, harming their soul, entrenching them into their sins, and causing them to go on the road to perdition. So it's not help. And so this whole thing, this whole video, that it was permitted, it's not an outreach to gays. It's Satan outreaching to gays, grabbing them and pulling them down into hell. That's what that is. And I have here an article from the CBC. So the CBC is always very good for LGBT propaganda. And so they published in 2017 an article about Saint-Pierre Apôtre, St. Peter the Apostle Church. By the way, it's a church right in the middle of the so-called gay village in Montreal, right across from the CBC tower that kind of looks like the Tower of Mordor with the eye of Sauron, big red CBC logo on top of a huge tower. And so that church is right across the street from the CBC tower. And so there's this article called, entitled, How One Montreal Church Became Popular Again by Reaching Out to LGBT Community. So I doubt it's that popular, by the way. But anyways, Aislinn May wrote the article. And I would like to go over it because it's a kind of, it's a class in how you propagate a lie through manipulation. So you read this article and it's like bang, 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 all these cliches coming together. So she starts off, or I don't know if Aislinn is a woman or a man, or if they identify in another way, but anyways, it's Aislinn May. So they talk about Yves Côté. He's the central figure in this article. Yves Côté is a lay person who does a lot of volunteering and parish work at this parish. And then there's the parish priest. But Yves Côté is the protagonist in this article. He grew up in a small town in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, 500 kilometers north of Montreal. When he was 13, he told his local priest that he was homosexual. He thought that he could help change me, Côté said about the priest. I didn't want to hear that. I decided that I would never go to church again. So there we have a man who was told that maybe you should stop having these relations if he was having them, or that this orientation, though not sinful in itself, is a disordered orientation. A man liking another man is a disorder in the sense that sexual attraction is ordered towards procreation. And so if you're attracted to the same sex, that means it's a disordered attraction, meaning it doesn't order to procreation. That's what it means, a disorder. But Côté is now the parish care worker of Saint-Pierre-Apôtre, and he's a large reason why the 165-year-old Catholic Church has managed to flourish in the heart of Montreal's gay village. Côté still remembers the day back in 1995, so he's been working there since 1995, when he heard the bells of Saint-Pierre-Apôtre as he finished a shift at a nearby restaurant. Then he heard a speech from the priest. He came in the church, he heard a speech. "I accept to be your pastor on the condition that we open the great doors of this church to everyone, no matter their sexual orientation or marital status. So whether you are lesbian, homosexual, divorced, remarried, you are all welcome at the table of God." So now that's an ambivalent statement, and I hate that when they do that. It's who is welcome? The person who wants to convert, so whatever their background, everybody is a sinner, so of course they're welcome. But what he seems to be saying, or he's playing an ambiguous game. He's saying, you're welcome, but I think what he's saying is that you don't have to change. You're welcome here. We're not like the bad other Catholic churches in town. We're a special Catholic church that does not think that what you're doing is sinful. And that's what I detest about these LGBT parishes. Whether you are lesbian, homosexual, divorced, or remarried, you are all welcome at the table of God. Yves Côté has worked with Saint-Pierre-Apôtre Church since he first met Father Claude Saint-Laurent in 1995. So tears streamed down Côté's face for the remainder of the Mass. He felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in a long time. So I don't want to downplay the pain that a person must feel when they have this disordered attraction to the same sex. It's a hard cross to bear. And I try to put myself in those people's shoes, and I can't fully because we're human, we're finite, and we can't do it. But I'm sorry that these people have this cross. Others have different crosses. Some people are alcoholic, so they have this inordinate attraction to alcohol, and they can't stop drinking. And it's very hard to get off it. Other people are drug addicts. Other people have gambling addictions. Other people love money too much, and so on and so forth. And so everyone has a cross to bear, and these people have a special, difficult cross, which is same-sex attraction. And it must hurt. They must feel alienated, excluded, and they want to hear that they're all right. And yes, you are all right in one sense, but not in another. You are all right in the sense that you're a child of God, made in the image and likeness of God, and called to holiness, just like everybody else. And you're a sinner just like everybody else. That's one way that you belong. But you don't belong in the sense that you can do what you want, that you can follow your inclinations, and then that's all right. That's not the message of Christ. That's not the message of God. That's not what you were made for. And I am very disappointed that this parish peddles the lie that homosexual activity is okay in the eyes of God. So after moving to Montreal in the 80s, Côté found himself in a dark place. He struggled with drugs, alcohol, and prostitution. So this is a common refrain in the homosexual lifestyle. But then he says many of his problems, he believes, stemmed from a past denying his homosexuality. So then he comes up with the hypothesis that I was doing these things because people didn't appreciate my homosexuality. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's homosexuality in itself that is a disorder that tends to this type of behavior. And you want to get away from that as much as possible. And that's the solution. So he was telling his life story to the priest, and then the priest said, "Do you want a job?" So he offered him a job at that moment. The first meeting, boom. And Côté asked the priest, "Are you drunk or crazy?" And I would ask the same question to that priest. Are you drunk or crazy to have hired this man right off the bat like that? Somebody who is not repentant about their sin, if they were indeed engaging in this behavior. It's not clear. But it seems as if what he's saying is that I engage in homosexual behavior and I am fine with that, and you should be too. And that's not the message of God. That's not the message of the church. The Catechism says that homosexual acts can in no way be accepted. That sacred scripture and tradition depict them as depraved acts. They're one of the 4 sins that cry out to heaven for punishment. So the article goes on. It's a very kind of puff piece type article. It goes on how, it's like a family there and everybody gets together. And then it ends with the fact that they have a shrine in the back of the church that's dedicated to victims of AIDS. Now, I have no problem with this shrine. So the problem I do have with this whole parish is that they say we are welcoming, and everybody says, every Catholic says that we are welcoming. But what they don't say is that you have to repent and stop sinning. Every Catholic has to repent and stop sinning, including people who engage in same-sex behavior. So there's a lot of work to do. There's a quote here that, one last thing, I want to quote Alain Faubert, who is the auxiliary bishop of Montreal, who was interviewed for this piece. And so they asked him a question. They said, has the teaching of the church changed concerning gay marriage and homosexual lifestyles and so on? And Alain Faubert answered, the official doctrine of the Catholic Church hasn't changed on gay marriage. But this being said, many things have changed when we look at people differently and how they live. Okay, so that sentence is not even English. Maybe he was saying it in French and it was translated, but it makes no sense. So this being said, many things have changed when we look at people differently and how they live. So that to me sounds like somebody who's trying to appease what he knows is a hostile questioner. When somebody calls you from the CBC, you know that they're going to push the LGBT cause. But the official doctrine of the Catholic Church hasn't changed. So he's got one gun on the side of his head coming from Rome and from the authorities saying you got to toe this line. And then he's got the other gun, which is the CBC gun, forcing the LGBT. So he's trying to please both sides. And he ends up pleasing no one, and he doesn't please God. The official doctrine of the Catholic Church, you go in the Catechism, and it says clearly that LGBT people have to be treated with compassion, understanding. They are human beings like everybody else, and they are sinners like everybody else. And so we have to help them understand that their sin is unacceptable in the eyes of God, and we have to shepherd them in that direction, just like everybody else's sin, whether it's cheating on your taxes, cheating on your wife, or engaging in sodomy or contraception. That's another very unpopular teaching of the church. Abortion. All these teachings form a whole, and you can't pick and choose. So this parish is a scandal, and it's peddling a lie, and it can't be tolerated. We can't tolerate this kind of thing. Yes, different parishes can have different styles, and no, you can't micromanage every single parish. But here we've got a problem. Here we've got a completely different religion. You've got the Catholic religion that says love the sinner, hate the sin. And you've got this new LGBT religion that says to love the sinner, you must love the sin. And so it doesn't make sense. That's a different religion. So somebody's got to come in there and say, stop lying to the homosexual people. Next up, YouTube silences teenage girl with 1 million followers after she blasts LGBT pride. So this is from Newsbusters. So it's YouTube. Google's sister company deplatformed a 14-year-old conservative girl after she made a video criticizing Pride Month. Her channel has been completely banned from YouTube. So she is called Soph, S-O-P-H. I guess that's short for Sophie. She's known on Twitter as Sewer Nugget. She's been penalized by YouTube previously for her dangerous quote-unquote humor and poking fun at leftist orthodoxy. She has 1 million subscribers. She was shut down. She rose to fame poking fun at topics such as radical Islam, strike one, climate change, strike two, pedophilia among Hollywood elites, strike threes, 4, 5, 6. So anyways, she was pushing all the wrong buttons, wrong for YouTube and co. and the globalist cabal. And so she was finally kicked off because she was too dangerous. She was a cute little 14-year-old truth teller, say it like it is. She was charming, witty, and so of course you can't have that. The 14-year-olds that you have on YouTube have to be trans activists. They have to do drag sessions. They have to be gay in some way. They can't just be normal girls that have very witty things to say. So they got her out of there. Even our little chain, our little channel, Campagne Québec-Vie's little channel, has already gotten a strike. We hardly have 1,000 followers. We have maybe 300 and something followers, but we already have a strike for hate speech. So they're coming after anybody who defies the orthodoxy of the one world religion, which is the LGBT inclusivity religion, which means everything is included except the truth. We'll include all persons and all opinions as long as nobody says that their opinion is true and the others are false. That's Catholicism that says that. So basically, the only thing that we're against is Catholicism. So as long as you're not Catholic, you're part of the gang. But anybody who says there's one truth, universal truth, Catholic means universal. So if you say there's one truth that applies universally, you're out. That's what YouTube will cut out. That's hate. That's divisive. You're going to divide people. We have to be inclusive. We have to accept everyone and their opinions. If you deny somebody their opinion, you're denying them. That's a fallacy, but that's what they think. They think denying a person, denying an opinion means denying a person. No, it's not at all. If you deny an opinion, you're just denying the opinion. You're not denying the person. And sometimes you have to deny somebody's opinion if you want to love them. Because if they're wrong, you want to get them out of error into truth. So they're tightening the rules. They're tightening their surveillance. And this is, of course, with 2020 and the U.S. presidential election coming up. They don't want a repeat of 2016. They're a bit loosey-goosey with their algorithms in 2016, and Trump actually won. There was a good momentum in YouTube. People were really going at it outright. That was cooking with Crisco. It was going very well. And they don't want that. They don't want that organic growth. They want to control it. They just want to splice it up. And they want to get out these phenoms like Sophie, like Soph. And I hope that Trump busts up these huge platforms, Facebook, Google, Amazon, all these things. They're getting too huge. They are utilities. They are no longer private companies. They are utilities. They are necessary for dialogue and communication. They're like the phone companies. It's like Ma Bell. Break it up. It's a monopoly. And they are censoring. They're more powerful than governments now. So just get these companies and bust them up. Please, Trump. Next up, François Legault, Prime Minister of Quebec, will participate in the Gay Pride Parade. So finally they got him to do it. For the first time in more than 20 years of political career, Prime Minister François Legault
diversity. The best thing about the parade was the guy playing the fiddle or violin, and I also like the percussions.
I think it's really important still to have a gay pride today because it shows everything, like we can show all of our colors, it makes us proud of who we are, and it makes us remember that
and respectful of sexual and gender diversity. What is this? Is this come down from the UN? Where is this coming from, this language? This is an important opportunity to promote equality among all citizens. And the government of Quebec will provide more than $1.6 million to the Pride Festival. So bravo, Legault. You won on a bill of nationalism. Nationalism, at its heart, is family. A nation is a family of families, and now you're going to support sodomy. You don't get babies out of sodomy, but I guess he doesn't get voted in on his coherence. He gets voted in because he was funded by Desmarais. Next, Boy Scouts have a pedophile epidemic and are hiding hundreds in its ranks, lawyers claim. So this is news out of the US. It's the Boy Scouts of America, and they've got a big pedophilia scandal on their hands. And if you haven't heard about it, well, you know it now. So the article reads, the Boy Scouts of America are continuing to cover up a pedophilia epidemic within their organization, a group of lawyers alleged Tuesday in a new lawsuit. The abused in scouting lawyers said they've identified 350 previously unknown scoutmasters and volunteers who allegedly preyed on boys and whose names were not known to law enforcement. You can't look at these files and not come to the conclusion that this was a massive problem that was hidden, Attorney Tim Kosnoff said at the press conference. We know that when a pedophile abuses a victim, it's not just one, so these 350 are responsible for several crimes each, presumably. So why, I didn't hear about this, I fell upon this news, but why isn't everyone talking about how Boy Scouts are a terrible place to be? You hear only about the Catholic Church. It's like the Catholic Church has the monopoly on pedophilia, quote unquote. Let me tell you one thing. 80% of the so-called pedophilia going on in the Catholic Church is of a homosexual nature. That is, priests preying on teenage boys. 80%. Therefore, the problem in the Catholic Church is not pedophilia, but pederasty, the classic age-old problem of homosexual men preying on teenage boys. From ancient Greece on forward, that's been a problem that's plagued mankind from time immemorial. And that's the problem in the Catholic Church. It's homosexual clergy preying on teenage boys. That you've never heard of. But they keep hammering away the word pedophilia to make you imagine that we're dealing with little babies or 7-year-old girls. No, that's very rare. What really is happening is 14-year-old boys being raped by priests. They've estimated that about 15% of Catholic priests are gay. That's Dr. Paul Sullins from Catholic University of America. And the percentage of homosexuals goes up as you go up the chain of command, apparently. And if you read Frédéric Martel, who just published a book called Out of the Closet in the Vatican, you'll read all about that, how as you go up the chain of command, the concentration of homosexuality goes up because there is a kind of network that reinforces itself. So the homosexual clergy network, they obviously hire other homosexuals, and it becomes a big problem at the top. And currently, in the current administration at the Vatican, it's a LGBT eruption. There's tons and tons and tons of homosexualist-leaning bishops. I won't go into details now. I've talked about it in other videos. If you want to check it out in French, I have it in. I have a video up on the French channel on the problem of homosexuality in the clergy. You can look it up on the French channel of Campagne Québec-Vie. But as for this Boy Scouts, as for the teaching disciplines, schools, as for other religions, you never hear about any pederasty scandals. They want to aim their guns exclusively at the Catholic Church to discredit the moral teaching, to discredit the fact that it is the church that descends from Jesus Christ, that has the authority of God. That's what they want to attack. They hate the fact that there's an institution teaching that there's an objective moral truth and that we have to conform ourselves to it. The New World Order wants relativism. That is, each person gets to decide morality for themselves. That's what the New World Order wants. It wants people to pretend that that's what they're allowed to do, when in fact they're brainwashed by media and so on to do what has to be done for society to work. But each is given to believe that what they think is okay. That's the ideology that's reigning right now. That's the rainbow ideology. And Catholicism is against that. Therefore, we have to shoot that institution down. We do that by discrediting it, by saying that they're pedophiles. Next up now, teacher kicks student out of class for saying there are only two genders. This is a LifeSite News story, and it comes out of Scotland. So a teacher kicked a student out of his class after the student insisted that there were only two genders, male and female. Video captured by the student on a smartphone shows the teacher lecturing the student outside the classroom for not being inclusive. That word again. As long as you accept everyone with their opinions, you're okay. If you start excluding opinions, you become hateful and divisive, and you were sent to re-education. So this student was sent to re-education, meaning out of the class, and now he will probably be dealt with in one way or another. So what's interesting about the video is that the teacher is not a young kind of millennial type person. The teacher is an older, probably close to retirement type of teacher. But I guess, like many teachers, they get their will ground to dust, and they have no spine, and they just toe the party line. So the memo comes in from UNESCO, or wherever it comes in from, the UN agency responsible for education. They read, "We must foster inclusivity in the classroom by not discriminating against LGBT and trans." So they read that means, okay, we can't criticize it. It does not follow. You can include people, like the church includes everyone. It wants everyone, it invites everyone, but it can't be in agreement with everyone's opinion because people are mutually exclusive in their opinions. Some opinions are true and some are wrong. So, but no, we don't care about reason anymore. As long as everyone is happy, we will even say 2 + 2 = 5 if that makes everyone happy. So we have no duty towards the truth. That's basically the motto of the New World Order. Forget truth. Only unity matters. It's totalitarianism. Next news item. Mario Lopez apologizes for ignorant and insensitive comments about parenting transgender kids. This news comes out of People's Magazine. And so this TV host, Mario Lopez, it's Hollywood Insider is the show that Mario Lopez works for. he's facing backlash over comments he made in a recent interview with Candace Owens. So Candace Owens is a popular conservative black woman, and she has a popular show with PragerU. And she invited this Mario Lopez, and they started talking about the transgender ideology. And Mario Lopez says something like, well, you know, I think it's a bit ridiculous when they say that if your 3-year-old says they want to be of the other sex, you have to respect that. Like at 3 years old, it's too young. So that's what Mario Lopez says. He says it's too young at 3 years old to choose your sex and to start the road down hormone therapy and all that, which is absolutely ridiculous. You mutilate your body thinking that you're going to transform into the opposite sex, which you don't. You just end up mutilating your body. And so that's what he said. It's going too far to indulge your child and to respect his choice of sex. You can't. It's a baby. He's still pooping in his diapers. You can't listen to what he says. He doesn't. I have children of my own, and they don't make any sense. They just tell you whatever you want to hear. They kind of observe this and that. They're not capable of thinking. They're 3 years old. So anyways, a firestorm broke out. People were saying that he was completely insensitive because he said these things. They wanted him fired. NBC scheduled an emergency meeting to talk about this heretic Mario Lopez and how he said this terrible thing about trans and whether they were going to keep him on or not. And so finally he had to bend the knee, and he had to apologize to the great god of LGBTism. And so he made a statement, and the statement can be read as follows. The comments I made were ignorant and insensitive, and I now have a deeper understanding of how hurtful they were. I have been and always will be an ardent supporter of the LGBT community, and I'm going to use this opportunity to better educate myself. He may have to watch that video that they filmed in Saint-Pierre-Apôtre. He might have to watch an unending loop of that video for 2 days with his eyelids propped open. I have been and always will be an ardent supporter of the community. Moving forward, I will be more informed and thoughtful. So in other words, I'm not going to touch this subject with a 10-foot pole for the rest of my life, and I promise, and please don't fire me. And they must have considered his groveling sufficient because he has not been fired. He's still on his little show, Access Hollywood. So this man, he's a Catholic, and I looked up his Wikipedia, and apparently he even got baptized in the Jordan River and all this. But for what? Because he's just renounced it. He's just given everything away. Oh, church teaching be damned. I want to work for Access Hollywood for NBC, and so I'm just going to say anything. Well, that's not what you're called to do. So you just betrayed Christ. Mario Lopez. It's a sad thing to see somebody groveling like that. There's a lot of pressure, but you have to deal with it, and you have to move through it. And it's called the cross. Jesus was on a cross. That means it hurt. And you have to imitate Christ. So you have to hurt a little bit too. You may have to do something else. Access Hollywood is just one job of many. You can just work at a gas station. It's better than betraying God. Mario Lopez. Come on. Next item. Catholic hospitals in Ireland refuse to comply with government demand to do abortions. So this is fantastic news coming out of Ireland, a land that has gone south very quickly in the last few years. So this news comes from Life News, and we can read, Catholic hospitals in Ireland are taking a strong stand against a government proposal that would force them to abort unborn babies. Ireland voted to repeal its 8th Amendment in May, a referendum on abortion, stripping away protections for unborn babies from the Irish Constitution. Now, government leaders are pushing radical pro-abortion legislation that would legalize abortion up to 12 weeks, and for some cases up to 6 months, probably if the baby is deformed, etc., etc. But Catholic leaders are fighting back, and so Father Patrick McCafferty of Belfast wrote, "Faithful Catholics will make no compromise on the issue of abortion with the spirit of this evil age." Fantastic, Father Patrick McCafferty. And the bishops wrote, "Abortion is a matter of life or death. To intentionally terminate the most defenseless is indicative of what is at the heart of human society, which must be rejected and imposed at every turn." So the Catholic hospitals in Ireland will not do abortions for the time being. So that's a fantastic piece of news. Now let's see what happens when the government threatens to withdraw funding. That's the big question, the money. Will they be able to do without the money? And that remains to be seen. But that's the true test. Right now, there's a lot of saber rattling, and it's good. It's good that they don't do abortions. Here in Montreal and in Quebec in general, you've got the hospital of Saint this and Saint that, Sacred Heart, Saint Justine, and they do abortions. And there's no problem, and everybody's just also happy. Or the CSSS Jeanne Mance. Now, Jeanne Mance was a holy Catholic woman, and she's spinning at her grave. You can generate electricity with the grave. She's spinning so fast. CSSS Jeanne Mance downtown, they do late-term abortions, a few steps away from this studio. Terrible. Like, the authorities should take down all those names because they are defiling the holy names of these saints. Saint Justine should not be associated with the abortions that they do at that hospital. It's a children's hospital in the French side, and they do abortions there. And they even have priest ceremonies after the abortion that helps in the healing after the abortion. This is abominable, and they should stop that. So thank you, Ireland, for standing up for the unborn. Next piece of news, this week in gaslighting, abortion services adapted to trans realities. So this is the FQPN on its website. So FQPN stands for Fédération Québécoise pour le Planning des Naissances. So it's the Planned Parenthood of Quebec, the abortion promoting agency of Quebec, funded close to 100% by taxpayer money. They are now publishing this manual for healthcare workers on how to provide abortions to trans people. So I call it gaslighting because it's as if they want to drive us insane. Now, gaslighting, there's a movie called Gaslight, I believe it's called Gaslight, where the protagonist is a woman whose husband wants to drive her crazy. And he does so by, one of the ways he drives her crazy is by turning the gas lights in their apartment. Their apartment have lights that are run on gas. It's an old movie. And so the husband turns the lights on and off. And when she says, the lights are turning on and off, he says, no, they're not. And so that's his way of trying to drive her crazy by making her lose contact with reality. And so these people at Planned Parenthood Quebec are trying to gaslight us. They're trying to disconnect us from reality by piling on the insanity at such a rhythm that we just lose it. And we just become like, okay, master, I will just do whatever you tell me because I don't understand reality anymore. You tell me what reality is. You've beaten me senseless. Just tell me what reality is. 2 + 2 = 5, fine. So they're saying that abortion is okay. That's the insanity number one. They're saying that it should be paid for with taxpayer money. Insanity number two. then they're saying that transgender is fine. Insanity number 3. They're saying that abortion has to be provided for transgender people. Now, they're piling on, boom, 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 boom. Insanity after insanity. And I just find that pathetic. And it's paid by the state, this organization, almost 100%. Nobody, no private person gives a dime to these people, give or take a few $100s maybe. A few people will fling a few coins at them, but their big money comes straight from the government. And they're writing and churning out these ridiculous documents on how to give abortions to women who think that they are men. I can't believe I'm saying these things. It's the end of a civilization. This is proof of the moral and intellectual decay of the West. And it's so obvious. When I'm saying these things, I feel like a crazy person. But that's where we live. We live in an era of insanity, and this proves it. Next news item, Hungary decries wall of silence, concealing Christian persecution. This is news out of Breitbart, and it comes from Rome. Hungary's state secretary for the aid of persecuted Christians sent around a summary of a speech he gave 2 weeks ago at the 2019 ministerial event to advance religious freedom, hosted by the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C., in which he explains why Hungary has focused attention on Christian persecution. The Hungarian government has set up the aid program because, quote, Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world, and Hungary is a Christian nation. Well, those two sentences will trigger just about any lefty in the world. Because, one, you acknowledge a fact that nobody wants to talk about, which is Christian persecution in the world. The Christian religion is the number one persecuted religion in the world at the moment. Not, I don't know, Buddhism, or certainly not Islam. Judaism might come a close second, but it's Christianity. They're getting butchered in Africa. They're getting butchered in the Middle East. And they're getting persecuted in the West. Church burnings going on a lot. And Notre Dame Cathedral being the most significant example, but it's a mystery what started it. It's a big, big mystery. But anyways, and so they're coming up with this truth that nobody wants to hear. Why don't we hear this more? Why is this phenomenon of Christian persecution completely silenced? Well, the reason, I would guess, is that they don't want Christianity to be sympathetic. They want to eliminate Christianity. So therefore, we can't make people feel sorry for Christians. We want to get rid of Christianity. Why do we want to get rid of Christianity? Because, like I said, it's the last bastion against the LGBT ideology. The New World Order needs an ideology that runs the whole show. That ideology necessarily has to be relativist, meaning we're inclusive of all opinions. All opinions are true. All opinions are fine. If you think you're a man and you've got breasts and a vagina, good for you. If you are a man and you think that having relations with another man is great, good for you. All we cannot tolerate, the only person we cannot tolerate is the one who says that there's a truth and a falsity, there's a true morality and a false morality, and it applies to everyone. That's a universal religion called Catholicism, and that's the one that we can't have. And Christianity, therefore, is a vehicle for this type of opinion, which is deemed divisive and exclusionary and hateful. And so therefore, we have to shut up about all these Christians dying, because if we talk about these Christians dying, people will feel sorry for Christians and might start feeling sympathetic to Christianity, and we can't have that. Therefore, just don't talk about it. Don't talk about Christians dying. So Hungary is one of the last bastions of Christianity. Viktor Orban, the prime minister, is doing an amazing job. He's not even Catholic himself. He's Calvinist, but he's probably on the very, very edge of converting. His wife is Catholic and his kids are baptized Catholic. So Viktor Orban is a hero of mine because he understands it. He gets it. And he wants his country to live. He's trying to discourage abortion. He's trying to promote the family. He's trying to promote large families by giving big tax breaks to families, giving cash, like $33,000 for families of, I believe, 3 kids or more. If a mother has 4 or more kids, she need not pay any taxes for the rest of her life. So these kinds of things are great, and that's what we need everywhere in the West. But instead, no. We want to include, we want people to come on in from everywhere. We don't have borders anymore. Just come and take us over, and we're completely brain dead. And so thank you, Viktor Orban. Thank you, Hungary, for still being sane, for being this kind of beacon on the hill for the rest of the world. There's Hungary, Poland is also sensible. And then to a lesser degree, there's Trump, and there's Bolsonaro in Brazil. There's not that much light in the world. People like Trudeau or Macron or the Prime Minister in Ireland and all these other places, completely out to lunch. And it's sad to see. Next up, multiple pro-family Canadians accuse Conservative Party of blackballing their candidates. This is out of LifeSite News. So this Christian psychotherapist called Dr. Ann Gillies was 6 weeks into campaigning for the Conservative Party. There's going to be an election in 2019, October. And she was campaigning for the nominations. So there was a competition between her and other Conservative Party members who wanted to be the candidate, the Conservative Party candidate for that riding. She was 6 weeks into campaigning when she gets an email from Dustin Van Vugt, the party's executive director, saying, you've been disqualified. Bye-bye. So a long-standing party member, she was a long-standing party member, Gillies was. She was shocked that she's been disqualified, and she wasn't even given a reason why. It's just, no, sorry, you are not wanted. But she has a good idea, she told LifeSite News, and apparently a source close to the party, a source that Gillies did not want to divulge, whose identity she won't reveal, told her that her public criticism of the LGBTQ agenda and transgender ideology was her undoing. She wrote a book in 2017 called Closing the Floodgates, so opposing the LGBT agenda in schools. And so she wrote this book, and because of this book, quotes were pulled out, and then somebody high up saw that and said, well, that's going to give us a problem during the election, so get her out of there. So she's gone. And this has happened to many, many other candidates across the country. And so the Conservative Party of Canada is only good, in the end, at conserving a kind of crappy status quo. So we've got the progressive faction, and this is across the Western world, it's the same thing. You've got 2 parties, and they alternate. You've got the progressives and the conservatives. So when the progressives are in, boom, things go downhill very fast. Abortion, same-sex marriage, euthanasia, contraception, same-sex ed in schools, transgender ideology, all this stuff, bang, 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 real fast, and they have no problem getting it through, legislating it, boom, 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 it goes down really fast. And then there's the conservative side. That gets elected, that side gets elected, and things stay on an even keel, so status quo for a few years, until the progressives get elected again, and then it goes boom, down again. So you've got this alternation between conservative, and progressive. So conservative, progressive, conservative, progressive. It's not left, right, it's even or down towards hell. And so I'm just saying that the Conservative Party of Canada conserves the status quo of 2019. So same-sex marriage, we're not going to go back on that. Abortion, we're not going to go back on that. Oh, but trans, maybe that's fresh, that's a fresh abomination, so maybe we'll fight that in a kind of a loosey-goosey, non-committal way. We certainly won't promote it. And so they just promise to conserve the status quo. Well, we need a party to fight the status quo. We need a party to climb upwards towards heaven. So instead of just staying like this, we need a party that goes like this. So when the progressives come along and pull us back down, we'll still be not too low to the ground. This way, if we're just going status quo and down, alternating between status quo and down, we'll end up in hell, in civilizational collapse very quickly, and that's where we're going right now. Another 4 years of Trudeau, we'll be massively in debt. Kids won't know, the difference between their genital organ and their rears. The brains will be scrambled, and civilizational collapse will be imminent. But the election of the Conservative Party won't change things. They'll just keep things on a status quo. We won't promote degeneracy, but we won't fight it either. And that's what I deplore. We need a party that'll bring us back up. Very rarely will you find such parties. Viktor Orban in Hungary is doing it. Poland is kind of doing it, though they're not as strong as Orban. Russia is resisting. Russia is another example of a fighting of a status quo through their promotion of the Orthodox Church. The problem is the Orthodox Church is schismatic. They're not 100% on board with what God wants, and so that's the unfortunate part there. But you can really count on one hand the governments in the West since, say, the French Revolution that actually fought for Christ, fought for truth, instead of just kind of fighting for a draw. We have to stop fighting for a draw. We have to fight to win. Win. So basically, the Conservative Party of Canada is fighting for a draw. They just want to keep a status quo. Well, that's not going to work, because next time the Liberals get elected, if not this election, another election, they'll bring things down, further down. We have to fight our way upwards. Next up, Raymond Leo Cardinal Burke weighs in on the 2020 election, the Dems, the Democratic candidates, and calls out Biden and Harris. So this comes from Fox News. We have an interview with Cardinal Burke. So Cardinal Burke is one of the last standing Catholic bishops of the Catholic Church. He says normal Catholic things such as people who promote the murder of babies should not be given communion. Today, that's a controversial thing, but I think that's a normal, banal Catholic thing to say. But he says it, so at least I give him, 10 on 10 for saying truthful, banal, Catholic, normal things. And so they interviewed him about the 2020 election, and he basically just reiterates the point that as a canon lawyer, he's an eminent canon lawyer, and before Pope Francis fired him, he used to be the equivalent of the Supreme Court Justice for the Catholic Church, apostolic signatura. So he basically, with his canon law expertise, said that Canon 915 says that if somebody, a politician especially, promotes abortion, legalizes abortion, approves reproductive choice, then if they're Catholic and they go up to communion and they want to have communion, meaning the body and blood, soul and divinity of Christ, then they should be refused this communion. They shouldn't be allowed to have it because they are not, in fact, in communion. They profess being Catholic, but at the same time they kill Christ when they kill the babies. And so when they actually commune, what they're doing is sacrilege. it's like when they put Christ in their mouth, it's like putting Christ in a trash can, because they are filthy, they are sinning, and they are unrepentant. So an unrepentant, hardened sinner can't have communion, because it would be like putting the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ in the garbage. That's why Cardinal Burke says people who are in a state of mortal sin and they don't want to get out of it, they're hardened and they say, no, this is okay what I'm doing. Those people have to be refused communion. So that goes especially for public sinners, like every Democratic candidate who, they were like jostling to declare their love for abortion and Planned Parenthood. All of those people should just be excommunicated, officially. None of these people are Catholic, period. They are evil. But at least Cardinal Burke said, well, you can't give them communion. Yes, they are all welcome to the church. They are welcome to repent. They are welcome, like the prodigal son who spent all his father's money and he hoarded all the money away, and now he feels bad, so he comes back home and he says, Father, I'm not worthy even to be your son anymore. I'll just work as a servant for a wage so that I can live and not starve. Please take me back. Those people are welcome back to the church. But these people, these Democratic candidates, and Nancy Pelosi and all these phony faux Catholics, they're not repentant. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, the next superstar of the Democratic left, she had a big fat cross on her forehead for Ash Wednesday. She wants to get that Latino vote. But she is evil. She's pro-abortion. She's pro-everything death. And they still dare call her a Catholic, and everything's fine, and they don't excommunicate her. I don't know who her bishop is. She's out there in New York. Is it Timothy Dolan, the cardinal there? They don't want to weaponize the Eucharist, they say, many of these bishops. Well, it's not. It's the defilers, the evil people who don't want to repent, who want to stay hardened in their sin. They're the ones who are weaponizing their mouths. When they chew on Christ, they're like flagellating him. They're whipping him. They're the ones using their sacrilege as a weapon against Jesus Christ when they sacrilegiously commune. Bishops should hold that back. It says in St. Paul, if a hardened sinner takes the communion, it's like committing suicide. It's not good for you. It hurts you spiritually. Therefore, the priest is lovingly telling you, don't eat this. You're in a state of mortal sin and you don't want to get out of it, so stay away. Don't take this host in your mouth because you're committing suicide. It's like swallowing cyanide for your soul. They should say that and be clear. And Cardinal Burke, thankfully, has been clear. And that's why he's one of the last great Catholic bishops in the world right now. Final news item, out from the Francophone world, I thought it was very interesting. It's Jean Raspail. He's an explorer and a writer, a legendary explorer. And he gave an interview with this online journal called Nous sommes partout, We Are Everywhere. So anyways, he gave this interview that I thought was very interesting. So the title of the interview is, The West Has Completely Given Up Defending Itself. So I just want to read a couple sections of this interview. I'm reading it because it sounds a lot like Rod Dreher's Benedict option. So for those of you who don't know, Rod Dreher is a Christian who wrote a book called The Benedict Option. And he says that for Christianity and ultimately Western civilization to survive, we have to do like what Saint Benedict did when the Roman Empire was collapsing, the barbarians were coming in. Benedict got out of Rome, a decadent, collapsing Rome. He got out of there and he formed a monastery. And those monasteries are what allowed Greco-Roman Christian civilization to survive. Because they had libraries in there, they had schools in there, they developed agriculture, technology through those monasteries. They were incubators of civilization. Those monasteries went everywhere in Europe and they networked with each other, making Europe a unified whole. And so these monasteries are at the heart of what kept Europe alive after the barbarian invasions, after the collapse of Rome. And so this author, Jean Raspail, echoes to the letter what Rod Dreher was saying with the Benedict option. So in one section of the interview, the interviewer asks, when we observe our modern world, we have the feeling that a gray veil has landed on the West. Do the last free men still have a chance not to be suffocated by this gray veil? So the author answers, their only chance is the isolate. It's a word of ethnography, and it refers to a tribe, a people, a small or large threatened nation. And these groups, these isolates, who are aware that they can't face the threat, like they can't face it head on. So today it's the LGBT globalist cabal, and they're just firing at us, they're censoring us, they're flooding us with propaganda, they're going into schools and brainwashing our kids. It's like the tide is rising and we have to build a Noah's Ark. So he says, in the West, isolates have already begun, unknowingly, to respond to the threat. Groups have started but may not yet even be aware that they can go further to preserve their culture. And he talks about la manif pour tous. So in France, when they were proposing gay marriage, there was a revolt, and there were these demonstrations against gay marriage of 200,000, 500,000 people in the streets of Paris against gay marriage. It was an amazing sight to see. In Canada and in the US, there wasn't that much resistance to that phenomenon, but in France, they really kind of pushed back. And this author is saying that these protests formed communities. They networked together. They started talking to each other. And that's what we have to do. Our monasteries are Noah's Ark for the coming flood of barbarity. They don't have to be physical. Our monasteries don't have to be physical. They can be virtual. They could be networks between people. But we have to start forming these. We have to get to know each other because the waters are rising, and they're rising really fast, and they're coming after our kids. They're coming after us. And so we have to be smart. We have to network, and we have to do it now. The water right now is at our ankles or at our knees, but it'll be too late. When it's at our necks, it'll be too late. We have to start now creating these isolates, these monasteries, virtual or otherwise, or these Noah's Arks. So I found this really interesting because people are having the same thoughts. This Jean Raspail is saying the same thing as what Rod Dreher is saying. They're doing the same thing as what Saint Benedict did back at the collapse of the Roman Empire. Last quote from the article. Question, you have said on several occasions that the salvation of France, the salvation of Europe, would come from the monks. Can you explain this? So Jean Raspail answers, the monks are in direct connection with God. They are, in a way, the internet to the divine, and they redistribute grace to us. Their faith, their beliefs are enormous. They have always been there. They saved the Roman culture against barbarians. They preserved Greco-Roman literature and philosophy that was going to be swept up and destroyed by the barbarians. Barbarians had no appreciation for that. They were just going to burn it all. They didn't recognize. And in those days, you had to recopy books every 20 years because they would just fall apart. And so the monks were the ones who were recopying these things. This knowledge was hanging on a thread, and were it not for these monks recopying these scrolls, we would not have had any clue about Aristotle or Plato or Cicero or any other of these people. Roman law, the genius of Roman law, the genius of Greek philosophy, Socrates, and the pre-Socratics. So they did humanity an amazing thing, but what they did, the most important thing that they did was they prayed God. They kept alive the idea of God. They spoke with him and they adored him. And it's the liturgy as well. They kept the liturgy alive. And to this day it exists in the holy sacrifice of the Mass, in the traditional form. And so, great interview. You can run it through Google. The link is there in the description. All our articles are linked in the description. So if you want to read the original articles, they're there. And so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our first edition in English of Culture de Vie, so Culture of Life. We're going to be trying to do this every other week. And I want to get a lot of good guests in too. We've got a lot of people who are pro-life around the world in the Anglosphere. So I want to bring on people from different parts of the world and discuss pro-life issues, pro-family and pro-God. So until next time, I bid you a good evening, and God bless you and yours.